Hi, everyone, and welcome to our modest but very, very honest podcast, The Messy Middle. And this is me doing the intro for the first time. I don't know how that sounds, but
It's good.
feel
It's
good
good. You're doing a
about
good
it.
job.
I give it a 5.
We have two really exciting things to share today. One of them is something that we've been waiting for the last 22 episodes. And thanks to Gabriel pushing Frank finally created our intro. And it goes like this.
Amazing.
Wow,
And-
Frank, you did an amazing job on that. So,
Great job, Frank.
I still hate you guys.
Finally. Now back to the second important thing for this podcast. We have a very special guest, Helaine Knapp. She's a successful founder, post-exit founder. She founded this company about 10 years ago and recently exited. And she immediately jumped to something new, I think. And I'm very excited to hear all about that. So, Helaine, welcome to the pod. First question I would say is, what makes a successful founder, rowing or running?
Oh God. Well, Teddy, I'm gonna think about that answer for a second. But thank you so much for having me today. The post-exit world is really interesting. There's actually just a no question about rowing versus running. I don't know how much time you have, and I don't think that's the goal of this podcast. But rowing works 85% of your muscles in every stroke. It also happens to be low impact. So I can keep going, but it's 100% rowing as my answer.
which one's better for your knees?
Rowing.
Okay. So,
Which one's
I've
better
got
for
my answer.
longevity? Rowing.
rowing.
Which one's actually
yeah.
going to build some amazing core strength? Rowing.
Rowing.
Yeah.
We know where
Yeah.
this is going.
We have, I mean, we can keep going. I'd love to talk about this topic, but I think Teddy's got other plans.
No, I would love to hear about like your journey, just briefly, how you started, why you started that company that you recently sold, and then we can get into the in-between phase and before starting this new thing and what are you working on.
Sure.
So,
Yeah. No, I'll give you the quick and dirty as to why I know way too much about rowing, having never rowed a day in my life. So a little bit about me. I'm a New Yorker, grew up in Westchester, went to Michigan undergrad, came back and started hustling. Like I loved working, like ever since my internship. So I did a couple years at Condé Nast in the magazine world. And what I learned there was that one, there was a hierarchy in working, and I was happy to put my time in. But two, I really actually saw what it was like to work for an archaic business as somebody who was like pretty tech savvy, and I constantly wanted to talk about Twitter and how we could talk, like get a tweet out for advertisers, and they were like, "What are you talking about?" And I was like, "Okay, I gotta go." So I really built my career in enterprise SaaS, and really at the intersection of helping brands understand social media and giving them the tools to power that through their social channels, through their websites. I did 2 exits there, and personally at the same time, I was figuring out who I was post college. So probably like I would say the second biggest transition in my life, second to what I'm going through right now, was really transitioning from college into the working world. And I loved working so much that I wasn't working out enough. And so I fell fast and hard for the boutique fitness world. So if you think about what the boutique fitness world was 10, 15 years ago, it was actually at a time where there wasn't enough supply for the demand. It was pre-ClassPass, it was SoulCycle, it was Pure Barre, people were doing CrossFit, but I fell fast and hard for it as a consumer. So you can imagine me working like a crazy person in these tech companies and going to these amazing group fitness classes.
Yep.
I'm pretty basic when it comes to that. So I am a basic bitch when it comes to front row at SoulCycle. And unfortunately, after a couple of years of doing this, I found myself with a really bad injury. And I was completely sidelined from this life that I loved. Loved working out with my friends. And it was from being sidelined that I started to really question what was happening. I was spending 4 or 5 days a week working out, pushing myself, and I thought I should be, the best shape of my life running a Tough Mudder, and instead here I was sidelined. I was wearing a back brace sometimes. And so to me, like the effort really kind of wasn't equating to the results and where I was. And so I thought something was wrong. And I'm a constant problem solver. So I was like, hey, like A plus B is not equaling C here. What needs to change for me to get the right outcome? And I learned pretty quickly about intentional and smart movement. My doctor told me low impact was really this incredible thing I had to look for. And I started to do some research and learned about total body workouts. And the only total body workouts that are also low impact is swimming. Mm-hmm. And, I'm a girl, and my hair does not look like this when I get out of the shower. So swimming was off the table for me. Cross-country skiing, not super accessible. And then rowing, which I was intrigued by because, you see it in CrossFit gyms, Winklevoss twin. But the more I learned about it, the more I thought, oh my God, this really is an unsung hero of the gym, that if I can make sexy and cool and mainstream and appeal to women, when I look at the macro trends in the industry, which is that we're working out not only just days of the week, but we're working out for more years of our lives. We have to be more intentional about the impact we put in our body. We talked earlier about, your knees, Gabriel. People are really destroying their bodies in their 20s and 30s. That was me. I was. And so I thought there really was an opportunity to bring something to market that was going to be fun, sexy, cool, but also when you start to peel back the onion.
Just a general question, but this whole process of, going through that story and to, thinking there's an issue, how long was that between there's an issue to launching the venture?
So I hurt myself in 2012 was when I had my injury. And I probably had the idea for it about 8 to 12 months later. And then it took me, a good year and a half to talk about the idea, let people poke holes in the idea, and eventually kind of getting us to our beta launch in early 2014.
That was your first business?
It was my first business.
And so just to try to tap into your memory as we see this thing as cycle, did you know you were going to build a business? Was it a process, or was it just something that you couldn't stop thinking about?
I never thought that I would be the founder. I thought that I would be the COO. I'm really, really, really good at executing, or at least I used to be. I don't know if I can anymore. I'm really good at
all of us. We don't know if we are. No, we're all good. We're all good.
I don't know.
We're all good.
We're all good. No, I always knew that I was really, really good at business. That was my self-awareness, is that as an intern, I was the most annoying intern because I couldn't, you couldn't give me enough stuff. I would just fucking plow right through it. Never thought that I'd have the idea. And so Frank, it was that when I had this idea, I couldn't stop thinking about it. And, I really did try and get no's. I did try and get people to tell me why not to do it. And there weren't enough things. I think it's also about being in the right time in your life where you can take a big risk. I knew that I had support. I knew that I had a cushy job in tech that I could always go back to. I was ready to jump in at this particular time in my life and give it a shot.
So it looks like it's almost your idea who pushed you out of a startup cliff, right? It's you were just there.
Too good of an idea. It was too good of an idea. Macro factors were there, micro factors were there. I did so much research. I threw up a website to try and assess demand. And I was like, if I get 300 signups, then I'll pull the trigger. I got 1,500. I was written up in the New York Times before I even launched the business as just a coming soon, So there was too much pointing in the direction, and that really helped me overcome the fact that I had no fucking clue how to run a boutique fitness studio, and I didn't know how to hire for it. I broke all kinds of laws also.
Where was the first studio? So where was the first studio?
It was in Union Square in New York on the 15th floor of an office building, which, let me just cut to the chase, not a great place for a fitness studio.
Yeah, but it's a great location though, Union Square. So
had to be
down the street. I mean, you can go to Bread's Bakery afterwards or before, depending on.
Definitely after. Definitely after.
After you want to do it. Yeah. So it's 2012, 8 to 12 months, and then another year to year and a half. So you launched CITYROW in 2014. Then official launch.
Correct.
Got it. And then we'll also talk about the process, the sale, everything else. But in those 2 years, give or take 2 years, you were still working full time at the other job, or you were like, I'm done, or how are you generating income then? Just curious.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. So I actually, one of my first tech companies sold in 2012, sold to Salesforce. It was a good one. I didn't get in early enough, but it kind of, got me excited. And so I was working at my second tech company, and I was the first female. I was the sixth employee there. I ran sales and client services. It was an easy job for me, given what I'd done before, but it still was like a high profile and a lot of responsibility. And, I grew a team. And I also, there's this really funny story where we were in Projective's shared office space down the Lower East Side. And they were like, let's go find space for like our real office after we have some money. And I was like, oh, I'm happy to do that. I'll go look for the space, because everyone's wearing every hat. And right. I was also looking for space for CITYROW. And it happened to be that in the morning I saw a space for CITYROW, and then at 11 a.m. I went back to the same building with the co-founders of the other tech company to see a different floor. And I just prayed to God that the guy didn't recognize me, because I was obviously doing this all on the side. So I did a full side hustle. I had no idea what CITYROW's economics were going to be. I also knew that there was a really good chance that I would have to go without a salary for a while. And I had a great salary at the tech company. I was going to get a huge bonus there. And I was also hiring all of my friends there. I also cared about the business. I liked it a lot. It's still to this day, like I really like what we were building, and it's influenced a lot of what I've done. So I worked the side hustle probably too long. I don't think I had a choice, because I was waiting for my end of the year bonus that was going to hit at the end of January.
Classic.
And I think a lot of people are in this scenario. I always recommend a side hustle. I don't recommend two startups though. Like I think if you got a really clean, easy 9 to 5 where you can work to live, you can easily start your company on the side. If you have a high profile job at a fast growing tech company where you're working 60 to 80 hours a week and there's a lot of stress and uncertainty, that's when it becomes really hard to do the side hustle. And so that definitely made me, I would say, like sicker in terms of like my body, because that's how I react to stress. And so my back injury actually got worse during that time. And ultimately, I actually had to have emergency surgery actually a month after we opened CITYROW, because it was just too much. I actually still had my job. I didn't quit my job until 2 weeks after we opened the gym, and they had no idea.
Did they start going to the gym afterwards, or did you get any of the employees from that company to come over, or not? There wasn't an overlap at all.
Actually, there's this young woman that followed me from the first tech company to the second. Mm-hmm. And I remember a day, probably about 3 months before we opened CITYROW. And she was my direct report at my tech company. And she cornered me in the conference room and she's like, I want in. And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, I want in on CITYROW. And I was like, what do you mean? I was like, I need you to run this fucking company here. Like, she's like, I'll do it on the side. Like, I'll help you out, whatever it needs to be. And, you always know who you have complementary skill sets with. And this girl was like an unbelievable operations executor, and she wanted it, right? When somebody wants something, they're always going to give you a little bit more. And so I was like, okay. And honestly, it was super helpful to have somebody, because when I was traveling for work, I remember she actually was the one that received the rowers at the first space. Like, I wasn't even there when the rowers got delivered. She was there for it. And it's actually really interesting. She ended up quitting about 6 months after we started and came to work for us. And then, ultimately there wasn't really a long-term fit for her there. It's a tiny, fitness studio, but I've watched her career ever since. And it's actually really interesting. She actually morphed into more of a construction project management role. And I think a lot of that was because she managed the construction of the CITYROW location. So yes, a lot of people followed me over. Also, I hired my best friend, my co-founder, and I also hired my other best friend, who I studied abroad with in college. We weren't best friends at the time, but it was really hard to find people in fitness. So I had to dig really deep.
So I guess that's oh, sorry.
One more thing is just like you said, did the founders of the second tech company ever come to the class? Yes, they came, but more importantly, a year later they wrote a check.
I was going to say, so that was great. That was an exciting and happy beginning. I guess the nature of a podcast is kind of fast forward to what happened, at the end of this adventure or at the transition, right? So, I assume startup story, there's a lot of things there, but if we zoom I guess so you raise money, you know, the thing scaled, like you had to deal with, I guess, a lot of drama, I can imagine, with management structure and all these things. Like it's not the same a couple of years later than when you started. Like, so if we now zoom, you know, from the beginning to when you were starting to transition, like, can you tell us a little bit about, was it a process also? Was it also a surprise, or were you like, okay, I'm ready to do that? Like,
yeah,
if you can talk
so
about.
I'll give you like the 60-second of like what transpired from that first tiny studio in New York City to where we ended up at the end. One, impossible to fundraise for a brick and mortar concept. Given my pedigree, if I wanted to start a tech company and raise 5 million, probably would have happened overnight. The economics of a brick and mortar business, totally different. So even though things were really going well, it was very, very, very hard to raise. Also, I've got a tech background. So like my brain is in like tech, you know, economics and securities and valuations and that whole kind of thing. And I always knew we'd go big. So it took me 7 years to raise a Series A. 7 years. And in that time, I scraped together, I had 110 people on my cap table. I'm the Aaron Brockovich of fundraising. I had no problem raising a 50 or 100K check from basically anyone that I met for one meeting. The challenge was that having a brick and mortar concept that was also bet very early in digital. So fast forward, we opened a couple locations, then we actually franchised the brick and mortar concept nationally. And at the same time, in 2017, we launched the beginning of our digital at home concept. So we were really an omni-channel business that had corporate locations, a franchise business that actually was doing incredibly well. We also were building our own hardware, software, firmware. And so very hard to fit into someone's thesis. And when COVID hit, we already had our first product in market for the at home. We had 65 franchises sold. We opened our first 9 in the 6 months before COVID hit. Basically what happened, and this is kind of the beginning of the end, our franchise business died.
Wow.
Entirely. And horrible. Like these people turned over their 401ks, had small business loans, like horrific. I cried a lot, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, you saw the complete opposite happening in our digital business. Overnight, we had insane demand. And we were lucky that we were able to support that because we manufacture here in the US and our manufacturer was our senior like debt partner. And so they were on the cap table and they made sure that our rowers shipped first. And so we were in a really good position digitally. We sold a ton of rowers and eventually that was the catalyst for us raising our Series A. And after not being able to raise money for 7 years, I raised 12 million in 6 weeks. Peloton was at a $8 billion market cap. So we were like, yeah, just give us some money. And then we also were able to talk about the fact that when COVID died down, our assumption was that brick and mortar would continue to rise. And we had a foot in both camps. And so that was our positioning in 2021. What we didn't know was 6 months later, the entire bottom was going to fall out of the industry. Peloton was going to like have a complete dumpster fire of a P&L and there'd be no demand left in digital fitness. And so unfortunately, that really was the beginning of the end for us. And the franchise business did not come back. It was very sad. Very, very, very sad. The number one driver of what was going to be the success of a studio was how long were they in the market for in the community, and ours were all 0. And so we tried to fight for the next 18 months. We threw up a couple Hail Marys in late 2021. I shut down the franchise business, and then about a year later, so we're talking about 18 months ago, we realized that we really couldn't attract any digital clients at this point. We tried to just attract digital business. We had a really cool way for you to engage if you had your own rower. You don't got to buy our hardware, blah, blah, blah. Wasn't there. I threw a Hail Mary pass. I crushed the cap table, raised $2 million at stupid terms to just see if we could get to profitability with a really cool distribution deal. Couldn't get there. And so it was a slow demise. It was 3 years of, I would say, ever since late 21, early 22. It was, I saw the writing on the wall. And about a year ago, noticing that the Hail Mary wasn't going to work, I confronted the brutal fact. And I am a cockroach, guys. Like, I kept this business going when it probably shouldn't have for 10 years. But the reason that I decided that it was time to start M&A was when I could not see the path. right? And I think a lot of founders probably go through that. But like, there was a time where I was like, I don't see this as an independent business anymore. It's got to be a part of something else.
That is crazy, and I can only imagine like the pressure, because you have so many people you work with, and your life depends on that. But maybe a personal question you don't have to answer, but was your back hurting again when that happened? Like, was your health, with all the lesson you had before and with running this, like, did you manage it in a better way during these times? Because I can imagine like the stress and the health has to be impacted.
Thank you for that. Luckily, I'm like really fucking strong, so I'm okay on the back issues. I would say my challenges were a lot more like on the mental health side of things. When things are good, everyone's really happy, and when things are bad, you see the really bad side of people. And dealing with the board and our investors, 18 months after we raised a lot of money, when the entire industry was suffering, right? Like, this isn't just a CITYROW thing. And that's what I have to keep reminding myself of, is that the entire industry was totally imploded. Like, Lululemon shut down. Do you know what I mean? Like, this is not like just isolated to our business and operations and we could have done X, Y, and Z differently. Like, Peloton fell into the same issue. So I got a little bit of solace from that, but I think the hardest part was me having to take the brunt of anger and disappointment from all these people. And as somebody who like leads a life of integrity, and I really take what I say with my word very, very seriously, it was very hard for me to confront the fact that, I said I was going to do something and I wasn't able to do it. And so that was really the hardest part for me, was dealing with it mentally and the stress of it. I would say from 2022, like summer 2022, I probably cried every single day. I cried on board calls. Like, I actually couldn't control myself. And so that's my vulnerable share, is that like I was unable to control it. And that was how my stress came out.
I get it. And sorry, but just one last question. I'll pass it to you, Gabriel. But I assume you took a lot of that learning for your book and and what you're doing now. And I'm very curious about what those learnings are. But sorry, Gabriel.
Yes.
Yeah, I have empathy for that. I think we've all been there, and have gone through the gut-wrenching experiences being entrepreneurs. And a lot of the post-exit sort of conversations are, okay, it's post-exit, we sold, and it's amazing. We made $100 million, but there's not a lot of the conversations where it's post-exit, we've successfully sold it, regardless of what the outcome is, and what that journey looks like after. So, Frank mentioned your book as well, Making Waves. I'd be curious now to have us go from, okay, all of this, for a better word, a cluster, going from the insane experience to then selling. Can you walk us through a little bit of that? And, my follow-up question to that will be about sort of the next sort of journey that you're on.
Yeah, no, thank you guys. This is a really fun one. It's really interesting. I started writing the book during COVID in 2020. And it was because I was kind of bored. Like, I'm not married, I don't have any kids. So a friend of mine who's written many books before was like, let's start telling the stories. And even before COVID and before, I would say the last 3 years of what happened, I have some crazy, crazy, crazy stories. Like, just insane things that I, went through. Again, like, I am a cockroach. Like, we've run out of money like 4 times. I'm talking no payroll, I'm talking credit cards shut off. Like, and I always was able to pull something out. And so she really wanted to figure out how to tell the story. And the initial concept was like, let's tell the story from a perspective of a founder that hasn't won yet, but probably will, right? Like, before the exit, before whatever happens in the last chapter that taints your perspective retroactively. So we wanted to tell the story. And then, interestingly enough, just as everything started to transpire, we totally shifted the energy of the book. And I remember calling her and being like, Leanne, it's a dark book. It's a dark book. We're going dark. It's not happy. It's not rainbows and butterflies. Like, we're taking it dark. And we did, actually. And so I actually wrote the book, and we worked together, and we downloaded on a weekly basis as it was falling apart. And so that's the perspective of the book. And it's a bit of an inspirational memoir. It's a personal story. It's a lot about who the founder is behind the behind the story, and also like what made me good at the things I was good at and where I faced challenges. I'm not afraid to admit the areas that I made mistakes.
That's great. Yeah.
And what I would have done differently. But also, like, you know, we had to confront some insane brutality. And at the end of the day, you know, there was a good article that came out about the sale. What I'm also like unafraid to say is that there were zero economics for me or the team. And I think that that's also something that I really wanted to be upfront and candid with. And that was a good part of the crying, if we're being honest, guys, because that looked good on paper back in 2021. But it was a real loss that I had to mourn, was the fact that this was going to be a very different economic outcome and fucking opportunity lost in 10 years. And so I also wanted to normalize the fact that more startups than not end up in this way. And one of the things I talk about, majority,
95%,
the majority.
Sure.
We're
yeah.
And you know, a part of the PEF community, why we started this Messy Middle podcast was because we wanted to cover both stories, right? And the four of us on this podcast, we've experienced successes and failures, but we've also experienced the idea of selling things and making nothing from it. But the press
looks like
look
success.
Yeah,
we're like the middle class of startup founders, you know. It's like the people who made it to fuck you money.
Middle class. Come on, a little bit upper. Come on, give me a little bit upper middle class. Come on.
No, but it's
still the Panerai. I mean, it's, you know, it's not. I haven't sold that yet.
I said the middle class of a startup exit. Like it's the vast majority. Like some very few people make it to FU money. The vast majority don't make any money, and then there's, you know, the people somehow who made a little bit in between. But it's, yeah, you have a lot of survivor's bias. So I just ordered a book actually because I like the idea of a book that's written with no filters. I think that's actually very valuable.
Yeah.
Even to research,
I mean,
like, so it's really cool.
It's a good book, guys. You all need to buy it. I'll accept your pre-order as a result of this podcast. But
I want it signed.
Can I talk you out of writing a book, or is it too late? Yeah, no, I'll sign it virtually. Can I talk you out of writing a book, or is it too late, Frank?
Sure.
I already did one.
Just kidding.
He did one, but not about. You didn't do a memoir, Frank.
No, I don't want to do that. But
I will say I'm like extremely grateful for the book process, because, and the timing was just like actually kind of wild. Like my manuscript was due at the end of July, and like that's when our final LOI came through, and then I got to make edits through the end of the year, and like it was so cathartic to be able to process everything that was happening and write it down in a way where I felt like, listen, I wrote a book because I wanted to hopefully help a couple entrepreneurs, or honestly people that are afraid to jump in, like tell them to jump in, but also like the water's fucking cold. You know? So
you done the book, you sold the company, you've been through all these, you know, happy time, less happy time. The cockroach emerged after, you know, the nuclear blast, and now what's your messy middle? Is it messy? Is it very clear? Is it like,
it's messy.
How do you manage the now?
So, I mean, like,
any ideas pursuing you in the shower, you know, that you can kill, or
a year ago
on the row? Do you still do rowing?
Yeah, I do, but I got a little PTSD from it. It's still the best fucking workout ever. Till the day I die. Best fucking workout ever. Like, despite the fact of what happened with the business, like, what we created is the best programming of all time. And like, I will put it up against anybody's programming in this entire world, and we will win. My criteria, obviously. But about a year ago, I saw the writing on the wall. I knew that we were going to go through an M&A process. I knew that they were messy. I've got enough friends that have been through this before that were in my ear. And I knew, I like kind of saw like the ghost of Christmas future, where I was just like, if I don't put some tentacles around things to ground me and to sink my teeth into creatively, I'm going to be a mess. And I was also like, the second I stopped driving for CITYROW, I was bored. And so happenstance, as things happen, reconnected with a friend of mine out in LA. He's got a small fund. He's like, I need you to be involved with me. And I was like, okay, because all I wanted to do was co-pilot, be around incredible people doing amazing things, and learn. And so I joined him, and we started doing some SPVs and some early stage businesses. We took operational roles in all of them. I started learning about all kinds of crazy different kinds of businesses, realized all businesses are the same, and that what I really love doing is helping the person at the helm I love being a founder boss, a founder coach, a founder therapist. Like that is what gives me joy. And so, yeah, I'm not starting my own thing right now. This fucking book takes a lot of my time, actually. So I spend about a quarter of my time working on the book. I do a lot of fractional COO work with early stage companies that have a little bit of money, or I'll help them raise money. Like I love supporting a founder that is not good at sales, but is really, really good at product or really good creatively, because I think that they're underrepresented in the fundraising ecosystem. And I'm obsessed with helping people hit doubles and triples. I want more founders to exit with 5 to 10 million in their pocket instead of being, I would say, brainwashed by VCs to go for 300 million.
Yeah, and then they end up not with 300 million. They end up with zero.
Exactly.
And they hated the journey. That's the other piece. Like I want people to enjoy their journey. This is a fucking beautiful adventure that you get to go on if you have an idea. Like, how do you continue to enjoy it? It is.
Yeah,
and I got to do it for 7 years on my own before I had a board. And it was hard in different ways, but like, I'm grateful that I didn't have to deal with this bullshit of board members that knew nothing about my business at all. It was only for 3 years and it was all terrible. So anyway, that's what I'm doing.
And so just to summarize, your messy middle was not messy at all, right? You didn't do an earn-out. You right away, you knew what you loved. There was no questioning.
Well, for 6 months, we worked on an LOI.
That's pretty messy.
Which was horrific. They hired Latham & Watkins for an asset deal that was a small amount of common stock. Like, we're talking about the dumbest thing of all time. They rode us pretty hard. Our iceberg of subscribers was melting, and they pulled out on the closing call after 6 months. So luckily, I struck another deal within 24 hours and got something done. But there was no role for me at any of these companies. In fact, the initial acquirer, like the CEO, was threatened by me, even though I'm like, I'm the fucking best asset you're ever going to have, but up to you. So there was never going to be an earn-out for me because there were no economics. If there was a role, I was open to it. I think my messy middle is realizing that who am I when this thing is over after 10 years? I spent 10 years and like from 25 to 36 building this business. Did you travel?
Did you do a break, or like again anything in between?
If I'm being honest, like there were no economics for any of that. I went no salary for the last 8 months of the company because there was no cash. And so I was just really hungry to get the announcement out so that I could start my next chapter. Like all the little consulting I was doing on the side was totally on the DL because I was still running CITYROW as far as anyone could tell. And I had to see that through. Like I felt very, very strongly about my fiduciary responsibility to see this company forward. That was the messy middle. And it's still the messy middle because even though we transacted at the beginning of this year and we're finishing the transition period with the acquirer, like I'm still figuring out who I am. I would say like it's going to take me a year. So yeah, I work remotely. So like I've been skiing like a lot this year and I went to Japan over the New Year. So like I'm traveling a little bit, but I have not had a mental break because I have to work.
And I think that is a case with a lot of the founders we know. I think we're all in similar positions that we're, sometimes Frank tells me, why don't you just go take a month off and go to Thailand? One, I mean, I could do it in theory, but two, I feel guilty. You sold, it was announced January, right? Was that the announcement?
Yeah.
So it was announced in January. It's April 2nd today, so we have no April 1st jokes, thank God.
Thank God.
Also, there weren't any good ones this year. I feel like since COVID, nobody's done any good April Fools.
I mean, I thought the Connections April Fools play yesterday. If anybody does the New York Times games.
Oh yeah, that was good. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess we're not New York Times gamers here. It's no problem.
Frank and Teddy aren't. So my wife loves Wordle. So
I like the Hacker News one was the Wi-Fi works better when it rains. But sorry, it's just the nerd ones.
Was that yesterday?
Yeah.
That was yesterday. Okay. Well, I don't know. Maybe I just wasn't online. So it's been 4 months, basically, give or take. you're on a book tour, launching Making Waves, which, yes, we'll all copy and we'll send out to our audience. You're professionally now being, I wouldn't say it's a founder coach, because it's much more. It's a supporter of a founder, coaching, etc. Founder or whisperer, right? From the transition, from founder to that, and thinking about it, how far in the future do you think you're looking towards? Are you thinking about, okay, right now I don't want to found something, but I'm still young, right? You're not 78 years old, right? Like you have a lot of time left and you have a lot of skills that are valuable. Do you think you would ever put yourself back in the arena to do it? Or you're kind of like, fuck that.
Yeah. I am 70. I just look great. No,
You're the Jane Fonda fitness rate.
I think about this a lot because it's been really hard. Talking about my gray area, my messy middle has been, what the fuck do I do? Like, do I have any marketable skills? Like, not really. Like, I could do everything and I can drive anything, but I don't want to do that. I'm really fucking tired and I want to take a break. And unfortunately, I don't have the economics to take the real break that I probably need, which is a year off to do nothing and just dedicate my time. And so you asked about how I think about time in the future. I'm giving myself a full year to not worry about climbing the second mountain. I'm not worried about building back up the nest egg. I am only worried about having enough cash to support my slightly ridiculous lifestyle and, whim trips to Europe. So that's the only thing I think about this year is I want to have enough coaching, consulting, advisory work that allows me to live my life in a really beautiful and rich way and that I can actually enjoy this year. And for me, that means like extra massages. Like I got to take care of myself this year. This is my year of taking care of me. And I say no to projects that I think are going to be too stressful. And I try and lean in a little bit more when I think I can have a bigger impact on somebody. I will, at the same time, and I think you hit on this, the easiest job for me to do would be to start a company and I raise $5 million and give myself a $250,000 salary. That would be the easiest path forward for me right now, because despite how everything ended, the first question that an investor asked me when we chat is when are you doing something else? I'd love to back you. And I'm like, what? I'm fucking tired. I wouldn't back me right now. And so I think that that's been an interesting dichotomy to balance, is that I don't want to do that. And yet that is probably the thing I'm most well qualified to do. And so I'm very excited to just flex this slightly quieter muscle of mine and also take the pressure off. I'm also learning that I do some serious COO work for a couple of companies where they really need me and I'm exhausted by it. I want to keep some boundaries up this year and really kind of build out the coaching, build out the speaking, build up the advising, and really kind of slow roll the deeper involvements, because my nervous system needs a break.
Thank you for being so honest about this. It's rare to find individuals that are truly honest. We encounter a lot of people who we definitely know they had negative economics. In fact, it's far worse than negative economics, and they're not very sincere about it. And they're not sincere about the journey. And so I'm assuming, because we haven't read the book yet, but once we do, we'll hear a lot about that in the book of, the true journey, not some whitewashed, feel good, everything is perfect. It's more of these true stories that will be not only tough to digest, but also, I would say encouraging, because, you want to read how hard it can be, and how on the other end, it's okay. You're still alive, you still want to do something. You just, went through, basically, I would say kind of you're going through, it's not a rebirth process, but you're now on this part of that journey. And it's really cool to see, because from us, we only know our own journeys and individuals that we've interviewed, and we only know the success stories of, the huge exits. What I also like is, though, how you have actionable goals to get through the messy middle, and you're making money. Like, there's a lot of founders who are just like afraid that they're never going to get out of the messy middle. They're going to be stuck in some dead end job. They're like, I built GM, and now I work at a bowling alley or something. So, I think that's important because, for ones that didn't have, strong, and the other interesting thing is you don't know what's going to be a year from now. So it's going to be really exciting because you're going to put the energy out into the world that, something's going to come together. That's how it always happens.
I appreciate that. And it's also really fun. And I think, listen, I had to process literally grief, the loss of what could have been. And I do want to normalize that a little bit, which is why I try and be extra transparent in what's going on, because I want more people to feel comfortable sharing it. And by the way, I'm still a fucking badass. You know what I mean? Yes, it is a 0 for me on paper. And I have to own that. But I also think that more people should own that, because I still built a company, I scaled a company, and I sold a company. And by the way, the extra piece that I get to wear as a badge is that I have to deal with a fucking demise. And that's actually what, these founders that sell for gazillions of dollars, they haven't been through the bottom falling out. And so I think that gives me a really interesting edge. I coach people all day long, and you really can't scare me. There's literally nothing you can tell me on a call that is going to scare me. And I think it's really fun to be able to have a unique position to be you think you're at the end, but I'm so sorry to tell you that there's 18 more cards to play. And so you better buckle up.
No, you're absolutely, you're very right about that. I remember, Gabriel knows that, but I did a consulting firm to kind of celebrate entrepreneurs, and part of the pitch was to say it's harder to make a $1 million company than to graduate from Harvard Business School. And the acceptance rate is actually higher at Harvard than just to make 1 million. So what you did, but I never understood why a young graduate from Harvard would be valued thousands and thousands of dollars, working at McKinsey with zero experience. Well, somehow entrepreneurs, and I think for their own fault, they don't value, as you said, you don't really know where you fit, but this experience is extremely, extremely valuable and very rare.
Glad I've been here on this podcast with you guys.
Exactly.
And our post-exit founder group too.
And we didn't prepare you for that, but I'm curious to know if you have any quotes. We always try to whatever lives with you right now. If you don't have one on the spot, that's fine. But
or you can read us.
I got plenty.
Yeah, a quote, or you can read us.
Which one helps you right now?
What's your
quote of the day?
Right.
Or your favorite song? I don't know.
Yeah, this is something it is a quote from the book, but I basically, there's two pieces here. One is that I think people should jump in. If they have the crazy idea or they're taking the big risk, I think they should jump in. But I think that they should realize that the water is really cold and full of monsters. And so go in eyes wide open, but do it. Do it anyway, because your biggest regret will be not doing it. So that's probably one of the bigger ones that came out for me during this, is to encourage people to do the thing, but to try and know yourself before you do the thing. I'm very self-aware. I am an insanely good problem solver, and I'm really good with people. So I was probably well positioned to be a founder, and I'm super creative, right? If you don't have some of these things, maybe you should try to jump into something else. So a little bit of self-awareness and a little bit of just do it, see what happens.
Makes sense.
Well, Helaine, thanks so much. I have this great pleasure of having great guests, and then Gabriel and Frank asking all the right questions, and I'm just observing and enjoying these conversations. But this was really, truly inspirational, being through similar sort of ups and downs. It felt also personal. So thanks for sharing those things.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks,
and
everyone.
Okay. One
Gabriel,
last shout out on the book. Can you let us know when the book will be released? When we can, where we can go to get it, just so that we can make sure that we can put all of that on our socials.
Yeah, thank you. So Making Waves comes out June 18th. It's available for pre-order right now on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, local small bookstore if you want to support it. And then all the information about me is just HelaineKnapp.com.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks, guys.
Stop.